On the line is Audacy NFL insider Ross Tucker. Insider calls are presented by BetQL. Download the free BetQL app right now and get instant access to the industry's most advanced suite of sports betting tools right at your fingertips. Ross, I got to start out with Sunday night's game, 42-10. 49ers beat the Cowboys, and just ask you what your impressions were.
Yeah, I mean, very impressed, obviously, with the Niners. Probably very disappointed with the game itself because I just wanted a close, competitive game, right?
Yep.
I don't have really a rooting interest. In fact, because I do work for the Eagles or whatever, I was joking that I was rooting for a tie because that would have helped the Eagles for both the division and for the home field advantage. But the Niners they just have a really good team. They're loaded seemingly everywhere. With Purdy playing this well, it really kind of puts them at a different level than it felt like they were even at last year. Their O-line hasn't seemed to really miss what they had in McGlinchey that much. And I also think the Hargrave signing was really big. I mean, they went out, they paid him a lot of money, and he's performed. And, I think the underrated part of that, right, is that not only do you go ahead and you get a player of his caliber, but you took him away from the Eagles. I mean, you took him away from the second best team right now.
Right.
Right now, the Eagles are fortunate in that they were able to draft Jalen Carter, and he's an absolute monster. So they were able to kind of fill in for Hargrave right away. But still, I mean, I think with what you have in Bosa, you really needed to have another inside guy that really is tough to handle, and that's exactly what they got in Hargrave.
Ross, you mentioned the play of Brock Purdy, and he seemed to kind of be the story from Sunday night on the offensive side for the 49ers. I was just going through some of the starts of guys in their careers, and Brock Purdy is number one in quarterback rating, 114.4. That's better than Mahomes' first 10 games in his career. I know that the passing figures have not has been as magnificent as, say, Mahomes, but is it fair to put Brock Purdy in the conversation of the best start to a career for a quarterback?
Ooh, I'd have to think about it, but yeah, I mean, he's getting there, right? I mean, he's won every regular season start. He got the playoff wins under his belt. He's played very well. Even when Brady in his second year had that great run and they won the Super Bowl, I don't know that he was playing as well as Purdy is right now. You have to tell me about other guys. I mean, I feel like Rodgers played pretty well when he first got his shot, but maybe not this well. I will say it's a little bit tough to tell because I was having this conversation with somebody about, we did a Twitter poll for my podcast at Ross Tucker Pod, saying right now, for the next 10 years, would you rather have Bryce Young, the number one overall pick this year, the guy that won the Heisman Trophy the year that Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant, or Brock Purdy? And more people voted for Brock Purdy, and I voted for Brock Purdy because it's the only sample size we have to go off of. But I guess I would say usually a young quarterback does not fall into this situation. Usually they're on a bad team like Carolina or Houston or whatever, and so it does skew things a little bit that he goes to a team that has, the best running back in the league, the best fullback in the league, one of the 2 or 3 best tight ends in the league, a very good receiving core, a top 3 offensive play call or play designer. I think he is having the best start to a career, but it's hard to just look at it in that vacuum, if that makes sense.
Ross Tucker joining us on 95.7 The Game. I mean, I think the other big part of this, and you can speak to it, is the fact that not only do they, teams with quarterbacks on rookie deals, they got an advantage. Well, this guy's not even on a rookie deal. He's on a deal 8 times, 10 times better than a rookie deal. And it's kind of allowed the Niners to to put a lot of stuff around him. Like, that doesn't happen either.
Well, and just wait till later in the year or in the playoffs when people start saying, that's the formula. That's what you should do.
Right.
Just draft an all-pro caliber quarterback in the 6th or 7th round.
Right.
That's the way you should do it. It's because it's coming. Like, I promise you, it's coming. People will start acting like, when the reality is, what does it happen? Like, once every 20-some years that you can draft a guy this low and they play this well? Brady and now Purdy. It's pretty rare. It's remarkable. It's funny because I was just thinking about this the other day because the Eagles play the Jets, and the Jets running back, Breece Hall, who was at Iowa State with Purdy like the whole time.
Yeah.
He's really good. And remember for a couple of years there where Matt Campbell was the hot coaching commodity in football because the Iowa State, they were winning all those games. Well, now I'm looking at it and like, dude, you had Brock Purdy and Breece Hall. Maybe you're not that great of a coach. Maybe you should have won more games.
No.
Yeah, Ross, talking about head coaches, and you mentioned everything around Brock Purdy on the field. I have to imagine having Kyle Shanahan in your ear and in your locker room is a great asset as well. I know that last week the talk was about McCaffrey being MVP for the Niners or the league. This week, Brock Purdy's in the MVP conversations. Is it too early to have the Kyle Shanahan for head coach conversation? And if so, do you think like last year, the embarrassment of riches on his roster are going to hamper him from being considered a legitimate candidate?
I think he's a legitimate candidate. I don't think he'll win because I think the formula is you have a team that everybody thinks is going to stink, and instead they're good, right? Like, that's who ends up winning it, which is interesting because this year, some of the guys that come to mind for me are certainly Dan Campbell in Detroit and Kyle, but they have pretty good teams, right? Like, I guess I'm pretty impressed so far with Todd Bowles in Tampa. I thought they were going to be terrible, after Brady, and they're 3-1 and they're pretty good. So, it really depends. If none of these teams that we think we're going to stink emerge as like double-digit wins like Dable and the Giants last year, then they will go to just the best teams, and they'll have the conversation about Mike McDaniel and maybe Sirianni and Dan Campbell and Kyle Shanahan. He absolutely deserves to be in the mix, but listen, the Eagles were the best team last year, and Sirianni, I don't think, did he even get any votes?
Right. Because
the thought process was the Eagles roster was loaded, and guess what? It was. I mean, it was loaded. And so that's kind of the issue that Shanahan has right now. It's one of those things where the voters are going to have to decide, well, if Purdy's the MVP, well, then Shanahan can't be the coach of the year because he's got the MVP playing quarterback for him, right? But if Purdy's not in the conversation for MVP, well, then if the Niners go 15-2, then maybe it's because Shanahan's a heck of a coach. It kind of becomes like a chicken and the egg thing.
Yeah.
They don't let you get both. They don't let you do both. They kind of decide, they being like the AP voters, they kind of decide who they're going to give a bigger slice of the credit to.
You listen to Ross Tucker, 95.7 The Game's Audacy's NFL Insider. Ross, before I let you go, so you are in the middle of Eagles country, and you are completely tapped in with that team. So it's just perfect, especially this year, that we're going to have you on as much as we do, because these two teams have got to be keeping an eye on each other. As a football analyst, how do you assess these two teams right now in terms of what one team may or may not have to do against the other team to beat them, or what do you see after 5 games that you're noting for that Week 13 game already?
Well, so the Niners have clearly been better so far this year. I guess a couple of points I make about that are the two best teams the Eagles have played are the Bucs at 3-1 and the Rams. And the Eagles really destroyed both of them. Now, their red zone offense is not really clicking, so they've had to settle for field goals. So they still have won those games by double digits, by 2 scores, but it hasn't looked like 42-10 like the Niners because the Eagles haven't been. But I find it interesting that the Eagles' 2 best games by far have been their 2 best teams they've played against, and it's both been on the road. That bodes well for them. The other thing I always tell people is that I really feel like 2 other things I'll tell you. Number one is, these games, especially amongst the elite teams, it really is more of like a chess match than people realize. And so when they match up in the regular season, and then, in my opinion, likely again the playoffs, it's not going to be the same pieces on the board. Right. I don't know who's going to be hurt for the Eagles. I don't know who's going to be hurt for the Niners, but you take McCaffrey off the board or you take A.J. Brown off the board, it's like you're playing chess and you just lost your bishop or your rook or whatever. It just makes the whole game plan different. It changes everything. I mean, you guys saw that when your quarterback got hurt in the NFC Championship game, right? You took the queen off the board. Well, that's going to change the dynamic of the chessboard. The other thing I would say is, as good as the Niners are playing right now, the Eagles still have the better offensive line, and they still have the better defensive line. When you look at everybody involved and the second string and all of that. And so that's why even if the Eagles aren't clicking on all cylinders with the skill guys, they start every game they play on third base because they have the better O-line and D-line in every game they play. And even though the Niners are very good at both and probably closer on D-line, they're still not as good as the Eagles up front on both sides of the ball. Now, they got better linebackers. They probably have better offensive skill. We can get into all that. But the Eagles still have the best O-line and D-line in, I think, every game they play, which is, think about that for high school football or college football. You start every game with the better O-line and D-line. I mean, that's a really good place to be.
Yeah. Hey, Ross, man, great stuff. Really appreciate it, as always. And have yourself a great week, my man.
You guys as well. Great talking with you. See ya.